this one just about every day myself, just to see if it actually does kind of work at all. And I kind of like it. Everybody has different ways of approaching the first notes of the day, and I think this is pretty standard stuff. We get into some different things as we go along, but I'll try to keep up with keep the pace clear, and hopefully everybody can follow along. If somebody is having trouble following along or whatever, let me know, and I'll figure out something, or Jason will figure out something when he's not handling people trying to pass out on our meetings. Okay, so I like to buzz a little bit when I start out in the day. And I this is just let me explain first. This is a sort of a template. I do different exercises for each. Whoops, lost my light. I do different exercises for different things, but I sort of go in an order similar to this. So let's just get going here. There's an F. So let's start with a little bit of buzzing, and I sometimes free buzz, or I'll use a mouthpiece rim. La, da, da, da. Okay, so let's just start this first thing. I'm going to try not to talk too much between these, but let's just warm up. I'll just shut up now. Two, ready. Now, if I was really helpful, I'd probably use a metronome with this. So, how's that feeling? Everybody okay with that? How many, I'm sort of curious. We'll ask more questions later, but I'm sort of curious about how people feel about buzzing, free buzzing versus buzzing on their lips, buzzing on their mouthpiece. There's a good argument to be made for either approach. I just sort of like starting things that way. So let's try playing it. One, well, I'll do it metronome here. Can you hear the metronome okay? You guys hear the metronome? Okay? One, two, ready. Good. All right. So the other thing is, you can gliss these if you like. I'm not a huge advocate of doing lots of glisses. I like doing some, and I like to spot check my articulation and use it for a specific thing when I'm working on, say, a Bordoni etude or something. I'll incorporate glisses. I like a little bit of gliss work when you're warming up, but I think sometimes people kind of overdo that. I've noticed a few of my students kind of overdo it, and one of the downsides of doing that a lot to me is you're not really remembering the placement of your slide on a consistent basis. That happens sometimes. It's not everybody, but it's something to just think about a little bit. Just make sure you return back to. I like glisting maybe with the way you would articulate it. The way you would, rather than just ripping through everything, maybe glist down to the note and be clean and and fairly articulate without your tongue if you can. All right. Now this next thing is sort of a variation on the Remington etude, Remington warm up, but it's out of Arbenz actually. It's a little different. It's almost it's sort of diatonic, and it's faster. You go through quicker. You do more than one key, and it gets you out of just thinking in terms of first position for everything. Matter of fact, let's start in the second system that's starting on the key of G. All right. These are good to do with a drone, by the way. I didn't set myself up for that, but if you have a drone thing set up at home right now, this is a great thing to play against it. All right. One thing I would also say that this first page of this stuff, I'm not really thinking too much about getting too picky about intonation. I try to get myself in tune first. That's the key. Is you get yourself in tune with the center of your sound, then you can adjust for the intonation and adjust your instrument. Until you play those first notes, I think you get a little bit too you can overemphasize being really sticky about the pitch, and I think it sort of builds a little bit of paranoia. I'd rather just let the sound be the thing that I'm really worrying about here and thinking about. Just make sure that everything's relaxed and full, and not getting too picky about my pitch. I mean, you could really get picky on my pitch on that last thing we just did. I think my C was a mile sharp. So anyway, let's just go from number 2, and oh look, it's the same tempo. What do you know? All right, 60. 1, 2, number 2. Oh, sorry, we're doing it in G. My fault. I start talking, I forget what I'm doing. It's the second system in the key of G. Ready? Key of C, actually. 2. Ready? Okay, still warming up. Let's try key of A flat. It's not there, but you got the idea. 1, 2, A flat, half step higher. Good. And I really like to engage my ears and my brain a little bit on these kinds of warm up things. I don't always like to think in terms of just bugle calls going down all 7 positions necessarily. There's nothing really wrong with that. That's been great for many years for a lot of people. But I like to sort of think in other keys. Sometimes my first note of the day might be a C, it might be a G. I don't try to just always necessarily begin my day starting in the first position. I guess maybe because sometimes with the nature of my work, I get a lot of last minute calls, because they've called everybody else first. And they finally get to you. Oh, I'm so glad you could do it. We've called every trombone player in town. So sometimes you get last minute calls and you don't have a lot of time to warm up. So it's good to be kind of thinking about your flexibility as more than just lip slurs, Okay, this next thing is just, I like to do this next little exercise in a couple keys, just starting on basically the 5th and going down chromatically, and then the root, and then back down the octave. And I don't know if there are any bass bone players here, but you can feel free to switch octaves on all this stuff. It's the first notes. These are all kind of common area. This is all kind of a common area, I think, for all of us. If there are bass trombonists here, I don't necessarily always start in the lowest part of your horn right away. And especially if you're interested in playing in orchestras, because a lot of times you've got to have that middle and upper register that sounds like a tenor trombone. And I learned this from auditioning third trombone players in our orchestra, that half the excerpts are the same parts as we have, and there's some high notes. It's third trombone more than bass trombone a lot of the time. So anyway, that's just something to remind yourself of when maybe when you're warming up, just to think, oh, just keep my middle register nice and popping. So let's do this next one. It's at a whopping 72. You can see I really jump out of the chute really crazy. All right, so here's number 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do the same thing, but start on an E flat. So you're in the key of A flat. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Right, cool. So sometimes I like to do that little exercise. It's just sort of reminding me of something musical. Try to make a little phrase out of it. Try to make a little bit of a crescendo, decrescendo. Just again thinking about music while you're warming up. It's just sometimes we don't. We're worrying about all our physicality. We're wondering about all these technical details, and that's fine. But it's also good to just sort of make sure you're always thinking about music. Sometimes I know a lot of people when they buzz their mouthpiece, they don't like to buzz exercises. They prefer to buzz little songs and something melodic. I think it was something that Arnold Jacobs talked about, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's a good idea too. It all depends on what works for you. I mean, it's kind of a concept. I don't have too much trouble switching from exercises to playing music as much. I don't think so. I'm kind of okay with doing a little bit of exercises and then reminding myself on little things like that to, hey, play some music while you're at it. So if you can make these sound musical, you're in great shape. Because I always tell students and people who ask about being a professional trombonist, we basically get hired to do very simple things very well. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, the trombonists that uh, don't get a lot of attention sometimes are some of the best players in our freelance world because they're fun to play with, they're consistent, and they make everybody else sound good around them. And that's always what I've strived to do. I've never been particularly interested in pushing myself technically to that degree that some people have. And it's unbelievable what I hear, of some players. But basically, you're doing that for yourself, which is fine. But when it comes down to actually getting paid to do work, it's amazing how often the simplest things are the things that get the most attention when you're and are most desired by the players when they're hired for a job. Anyway, I think it's largely true in an orchestra too. But all right, let's go to this next thing. I sometimes buzz these, sometimes I don't. These little slurs, these are all familiar kinds of little slurs. The thing I think about buzzing is I do kind of do a gliss between notes. I try to think of just the air as a constant thing. You've all heard that before, I'm sure. But it's amazing how I find I catch myself once in a while doing stuff with my air that wasn't intending to do. It maybe because I'm trying to get a note to jump out, or I'm trying to be really clear with having the right kind of support in my head. But if I just blow through it, it's really helpful to use the analogy of this on the mouthpiece. I find that useful. I'm not sure why, but so anyway, let's do a little bit of this. There's B flat, sort of, maybe a little high. So let's just buzz through this. We'll go down through the whole thing, and we'll take a break. Repeat it with the horn. Okay, 1, 2. Oh, I'll put on the mention. I'm sorry. It's better that way, isn't it? Okay, it's a little slow, just for fun. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go to that. Let's play it once. 2, ready. Okay, good. You notice that we kind of came back to buzzing after we'd already been playing a little bit. That's something I like to do. I don't just necessarily think of buzzing as just the beginning of the day, and then once you're done with a couple minutes, then you're back to blowing on the horn. That's again, that's an approach a lot of people have used, but I've actually found it quite useful to come back to buzzing as a little way to break things up. It's also a great thing to do while you're working on something. If you're working on an etude or a solo, to try to buzz a little bit of it. I think you have to be careful with that. I mean, you don't want to play too loud when you buzz. Remember, the buzz is amplified through the horn or resonated through the horn. So you don't necessarily want to buzz that loudly. You want to buzz quite softly, because a piano on the mouthpiece translates to like a mezzo forte on the trombone. So you want to try to keep at least the dynamic, the way that you're playing similar when you go back and forth between the mouthpiece or just buzzing and your horn. But I like to also, I find mouthpiece buzzing really helpful for my ear and the connection between my ear and my face. And I think that that's really important. There's like that little moment right before you play a note where if you're not really hearing the note and your lips aren't in a place to respond to them automatically, I think it could be a little bit dangerous. So this is a good way to build that habit of being able to buzz the note that you hear. I learned a great line from Harold von Skake, great bass trombone player. He said, "Sing it, buzz it, play it." I like that little system where you if you have a piece of music you're working on, sing through it, get your ear and your body and your mental notion of what you're trying to play really clear in your head, and try to sing it, and then buzz it as if you sang it, and then play it as if you sang it. So I think that's a nice little thing to work on, or a little tool to use when you're working on a piece of music. I've shared that with some band directors, and they really like that idea. They've got their whole brass section doing that now. It's kind of fun. Sing it, buzz it, play it. And I like to hear it, sing it, buzz it, play it. You hear it in your head really clearly, and then try to connect. We're always trying to connect to the best picture we have of the music in our mind, and I think a lot of people have to consciously do that. I mean, I do. I think everybody, it's a good idea. Some people naturally do that quite well, but a lot of people, it's like throwing darts for what sounds musical. They just kind of, okay, let's see what this sounds like. But if you actually have a really good picture in your head, and your practice really is getting closer to that image that you have in your head all the time, and I think that's a great way to start doing it right away, is with how you think of your sound and the way you move between notes when you're warming up. I think it's a great opportunity to sort of focus on that most fundamental technique that we have, is just moving between notes. So, all right, let's go on to the next thing, which is just some low register stuff. This is another blistering tempo. I hope I'm not losing everybody on this. It's really fast and furious. This is 72. And I'll go up to the next page. If you want to, let's see, the next page, it just goes into it goes up to B flat. So if I leave it this way, will everybody be able to handle going up the keys without me switching pages? Yeah, I think we can. All right. So start on E, nice and easy. Big. It repeats. Play it a little softer the second time, just for control and focus. 1, 2, 3. So sometimes on that little exercise, I like to let my imagination and curiosity factor sort of enter in. Sometimes I might play really, really soft on some of those just to break it up, just to see how my sort of take some inventory on the control of my chops in the low register playing soft. That's something I have to do quite a bit. So but hopefully without all that spit in my horn. So nothing like a low E with a full spit.
I just thought it was the internet.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. So this next thing is we're okay, and then at the end we didn't do that. We play the little pedal thing. That's just to sort of loosen up your chops, whatever. So this next thing is I think either out of Arbenz or I stole it from somebody, but it's basically going around the cycle of fourths. I really think or fifths, cycle of fifths, and I think it's really important to actually it's cycle of fourths. What am I saying? Anyway, so I think it's really important to keep these kinds of ideas in your head, especially if anybody's interested in improvising or anything like that. This is a great, just little simple exercise to go through a very common harmonic progression that's good to have in your head no matter what kind of music you play. But it's really good to sort of be able to hear and recognize these things. I encourage if you think you catch on to this exercise, just close your eyes and go to the next one if you can. It's a good one to do. Just what I'm going for here is just clarity on starting notes, just real simple, and I'm not getting too analytical about it. I'm just getting through the exercise. I'm going to miss some notes probably going along here. I might play wrong notes too, but I don't worry about it too much. I'm just focusing on, I'm going to have, 50 chances to play good quarter notes. So I'm going to just try and focus on that. Good long notes, everything going into the next note. I would also experiment with where you breathe. You could breathe between every two measures or something, that's fine, but I think it's a little more musical to breathe kind of consistently after beat 3. So you're actually taking that next note into the next place. Jason, you had a question?
Yeah, just a real quick question. Is there any way that you can full screen this one for better viewing for the others?
Sure, I figured out how to do that. So let me see.
And I'm a PC, so I can't help you.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let's see. I think I figured out how to do it.
Hey, Alex, hit the green button in the top corner.
Oh, there you go. Let's see. Wait a minute. It's not okay. Wait a minute. Oops, that's the wrong green button. Oh, I'm an idiot. I had this. I can do it from my computer too. I think.
That already looks bigger.
A little circle. A little circle.
Yellow, green button.
Your cursor. Just maximize the browser.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I'm sorry, guys. It's in view, right? Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, we're just trying to get your browser to maximize here.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that little, see there's a red, a yellow, and a green circle in the top left. Is that it?
There we go. Hit the green one.
I think so.
Yeah, there we go. No, is it better? I think it's still showing two pictures.
It is
You want to do
larger.
that okay?
It is larger. Well, it was.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's as big as I can make it. Unless I go to one page. Let me try that. Single page. I'll do that. Well, that's about as big as I can make it, I think. There we go. How about that?
Ooh.
That's getting really big.
Ooh.
I'm definitely liking that font size. But
My old eyes, man.
I'll try to. Is that okay?
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Sorry. I need somebody much younger than me to come help me. All right. So let's see. For this one, we're gonna go at a whopping 88. I know that's kind of crazy. I know this early in the morning for me. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'll try to get a different view. There we go. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll go on. I'll give us a little more room here. Oops. Here we go. Starting in D, right in the middle of that third system from the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Got everybody? Didn't lose anybody there? Yeah, it's kind of a little 2-minute drill, just to sort of keep the horn on your face and keep your air moving. And yeah, another question for Jason.
Just a quick question for you. When I play through this and I'm looking at it in front of me, I feel like I'm kind of experiencing it a certain way. Whereas if it's not in front of me and I'm kind of like improvising or using like my improvising brain, I feel like that's kind of a different, it feels quite different. So do you advocate kind of reading it sometimes and then just imagining it?
All that kind of what we might call grunt work, fundamentals work. That I think it's important to kind of think of it both ways, because you have to recognize these things in context when you play music. Sometimes when you're just looking through music, oh, that's a 5 to a 1 chord. Okay, great. So I think it's good to, depending on how your brain works. I think it's good to do it both ways. I think it's really good for people to get away from the paper once in a while, though. I really think it's a healthy thing. You hear yourself differently. You notice more things about your playing, I think, sometimes when you take the music away. So it's good. I agree. It's good to do it both ways, but I think more people tend, especially when they're starting up in the morning, they don't want to be challenged too much, maybe. So I encourage them to, don't be afraid to sound bad in your first notes of the day. That's actually a good sign. That's exposing you to the things you need to work on. So it's good to be able to just test yourself and the lay of the land for harmony and where your positions are on your horn. So that's a good one. Okay, now we're just going to do some slow scales. These are stolen from Per Brevig. So these are just nice and slow scales, descending, going down to low E. And at this exercise, I'm really starting to focus. I'm starting to. This is when I would probably put a tuner on it at this point in my warm up. It's usually about 10 or 15 minutes in, and I might do, or I might play these with drones real quickly off of either whatever tuning app you like. I like Tonal Energy, but whatever tuning app you like, you can throw in a drone and play along with that. So let's see. Okay. And again, one thing that I like, that somebody said that recently, and I'm not sure who said it, consider taking a quality breath between each scale rather than a large quantity of air. I kind of, for some reason, that analogy hits with me. My wife's a flute player. She says, that doesn't really work. And I don't know. For me, it does. It's kind of a nice idea. Rather than tanking up with air between each phrase, you just think of bringing in a great quality of air, just this wonderful feeling of warmth and, butterflies and all that stuff. So this is, you want a really nice, full, but quality breath. It's not necessarily like with force and effort. It should be just something that just feels good to take in a nice breath at the end of your scale. It's like a little reward. Okay. So then it just goes out the same way. So this is a nice way to think about that feeling of taking air in and putting it out in a sort of mirror image of itself. So I like this exercise for that. I mean, it's just simplest scales in the world, but you can actually get into a nice mind space with this and actually get some work done with your playing. So let's try this one. Another whopping 60. Okay, one. Oh, I'm gonna empty my spit valve this time. There we go. 1, 2, 3. That feel good? I hope so. That's a nice one. Now we just sort of turn it around and do two of each of these scales. Again, bass bone people, feel free to switch octaves wherever you want. But I also encourage bass drum players to tough it out and go through the full thing all the way up to B flat if you can. If you don't play any more high notes today, this might be a good one to just get it off, check it off your list. All right, so and one of the things I do with this scale, okay, again, just simple scales, but one of the things I like to do with this is I kind of like to keep, this is going to sound a little weird, but bear with me if I can explain it well. On the low notes, I don't think necessarily down too far. I don't try to open up and really open up my sound. I try to keep kind of a middle ground, almost as if I'm thinking more about my high notes that are coming than the higher notes that are coming, rather than changing when I go into the upper register. Does that make sense? I'm really thinking towards a middle kind of approach. I'm not letting my embouchure get away from me too far to accommodate a register. I try to just blow and see what comes out given my basic sort of embouchure setting. So it's not a real manipulation of the embouchure, but I'm just trying not to overwork. I guess that's the idea. So what I do on the low notes, I think of high notes. On the high notes, I think of low notes. That's kind of the idea. It sounds weird when you say it, but that's, to me, it kind of pulls me together and keeps me from either pinching too hard, pinching too much on the upper register, and opening up too much with the lower register. I find a lot of times, a lot of players, when they stop opening up so much for the low notes, especially in this register, which isn't that low, but it's just sort of kind of the bottom of the tenor trombone. When they open up to accommodate it, it might sound pretty good, but it's amazing if I encourage them not to open up so much, how much more clarity and focus is in the low register when they're not opening up. It just seems to be that way. Again, I can't explain it fully. Jason would probably have a better idea of the physics behind it than I do. But anyway, so this is just something I like to, this is a time for me to remind myself of that idea. So let's just do these scales. We'll go from F up to B flat. This takes about a minute. And feel free to stop anywhere. In some of these, they go on for kind of a long time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we go. Right there. Who sees the mistake? First one to say it out loud. Open up, say it.
A natural.
Yeah, A natural and?
Should be a C flat.
Yes! Thank you. I don't know why that didn't come through. I've corrected that like 5 times on this, and somehow it always comes through again. So anyway, let's go with G flat, not G, whatever that scale would be otherwise. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Good. If you had any little gaps or skips in your scale, like it's like, and you want to kill yourself because it's just scales, but somehow a note didn't speak, and you want to just like, what an idiot. That happens to everybody. I actually give myself a break and go back and do it and try to remind myself, okay, if you stop right after the note doesn't speak, or maybe you crack a note or something, I think it's good to go back and do it again and remind yourself just to stop pushing it so hard. A lot of times when I have a note that doesn't speak, I'm trying to do too much. It's very much that's something I notice right away, and it's good to go back on this exercise, I think, once in a while and catch that scale again and just see if you can remind yourself how to do it correctly, or just feel guilty about it and come back to it tomorrow. All right, so a little articulation. I might have a hard time with the page turn here, but we get the idea. It's just going down chromatically. It's a little bit of a variation on one of the exercises from Mike Davis's 20-minute warm-up, and I just extended it out a little bit and made it a little more complicated. A couple notes here. You see detached, but not too long or short, not too short, not but a nice full sound on every note. Every exercise, I think, I forget who said this, but every exercise is a sound exercise, I think. Every time you play anything like this, it's still about sound. It's not just about the articulation. So you want to make sure that your sound is just as good as it's been up through all these sort of longer notes. So keep a good quality sound. Always compare yourself to what you were just doing. And again, the airstream stays steady. You don't want to puff the air necessarily too much for each note. You want to make sure that water spigot is open and flowing the whole time. All right, so let's try this, and we'll take it at a decent. I figured out a nice tempo for this. Let's see, maybe 92. I think that'll be good. Single tongue. Let's get it to 92. Ready? Okay. So we're going to go all the way down to E. I can encourage you to go further down to B below that. So, but we'll just go down to E for right now. How are we doing on time, Jason? I just want to make sure I don't go over anywhere. Okay.
Yeah, we're fine. Typically, people bail when they need to, and whatever you.
Keep hanging. Okay, good. To actually go through this whole warm up, I timed it. If you don't stop or just take little breaks, it takes about 35 to 45 minutes roughly. So we'll keep cranking along. We're talking too much, I think. I'm talking too much. All right. Here's 8. 1, 2, 3. One thing I like to keep in mind as I go down the slide is to try to keep the same sound or similar sound I had in the upper positions. Try to keep that same timbre as much as possible as I go down the slide. A lot of times a given partial that we're playing will sometimes lose its sound quality out as you move the slide. You're working against a longer tube. But I think you can kind of compensate that if you think about it either musically in terms of just having a similar timbre that you're going for. So you're actually helping set yourself up to be able to use those positions when you play alternate positions. That's why I like to use a lot of alternate position kind of things in my warm-up, because I'm always trying to make sure that those notes are accessible and have maybe a sound that I can use as a replacement for the regular position, so it isn't as big a change going between partials in the outer positions. That's one thing. And then also your tongue might be moving around a little bit. That's okay if you're changing your position as you go lower. That's probably fairly natural, and I think it's an effective thing. Is you shouldn't assume that your tongue is going to be in the same spot as you articulate all the time in every register. Some registers it's important to maybe tongue a little more in the lower register, more between your teeth, and then maybe in the upper register, tongue a little bit higher near the arch of your mouth, and think of aiming there a little bit. I don't like to think too much about the tongue, but this is one little exercise where I sort of take a little inventory of what I'm doing and see if it changes. If I change it a little bit, if it sounds better, it's like, oh yeah, that's that sweet spot I'm looking for. So it just gives you a chance to investigate that a little bit. All right, let's just do some. Let's play a song. Wild. Right here, very often when I get to a point like this, I might pull out a Bordoni etude that I really love to play, or some other melodic thing, or a tune, or a melody. I'll just play it just as a way to just play something musically and something melodic. We could do America here. We'll just do that together, or we could just since everybody's muted. If you don't want to play this, that's fine. And mute me and just play something pretty. I don't care what it is. All right, I'm going to play America though. I'm going to play it in G in tenor clef. Just puts you back in the headspace of playing music. All right. Did anybody play else? What else did people play? Did anybody play a different song?
I played with you in tenor clef down the octave.
Woo! All right, Terry. Good to see you, Terry. Where are you at right now? You look like you're in a garage.
I am in a garage. I'm not too far from you. We've been back in California since February.
Oh,
Things been a mess.
Well, good to see you. Really good to see you. Terry, if you don't know Terry, she's a wonderful bass trombone player. Anyway, and all-around musician. She travels the world with a band with her husband, and it's really a cool band with a horn section. It's very cool. All right, let's now, I usually do, again, these are just little templates. I very rarely do the same slurs every day. If there's one that I sort of discover is giving me trouble, I might do it for a few days or a week. But I like to do them I like to do them slow and fast. I mean, I think right now we've done a few sort of slower lip slur kind of things, so we'll speed this up a little bit, but it's still not going to be breakneck kind of stuff. Let's see, what tempo did I pick for this? Okay, so like 116, which is a good clip. So we play this 3 times. Now I discovered something. I used to do a lot of lip slurs where I just do it once and go to the next position once, but then I found the Irons trumpet routines, and he has these long slurs that go on for almost a line, and I went, wow, that's one slur just repeated over and over, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But then when I started doing it, I really saw the practical benefit of it, because as you're going through it, you get better. You try to improve it. It's like, no, let's get a little bit cleaner. Not so much, you don't have to move so much. You don't have to work so hard. And keep the air moving. It gives you a chance to sort of have a nice little self-talk moment of being productive, rather than getting hung up on, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd done this. So you're actually saying, make it this way, make it that way. So it's a good thing. So it feels weird to play these 3 times. It's kind of a long time to hang out on these slurs. But let's give it a shot. We'll play the first one, number 10, the B flat F, B flat D, and we'll play it in all 7 positions and 3 times in every position. So if this I sort of shorthanded this exercise, but you'll catch on. I have faith in all of you. Okay. And again, that airstream, same thing as when we're articulating. Keep that airstream nice and steady. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Good. Now, one other thing I like to do with slurs is I like playing them as bugle calls like that. That's fine. It's a great way to just be able to just focus on your area. You don't have to worry about moving your slide. That's isolating an element like that is, I think, fine. It's really good. But once in a while, it's good to play these and change a note or two. So I'm going to play it this time, and I'm going to play it in minor. Okay, we're going to do the same exercise. Won't go through all 7 positions, but just like the first 3 or 4 positions. And let's play D flats and then C's. Okay, just to change it up. And keep your slide involved in the lip slur just as if it's not even working. Just that model that you had for not moving your slide, make it just that way when you're moving your slide. 1, 2, 3. Kind of fun, isn't it? It's a little different. Your roommates or your neighbors might go, "Wow, he's really stretching out today. That's great." All right, what I usually do is out of these first, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slurs up. I'll pick 2 or 3, and then I'll do the big one at the end, just to sort of really push myself a little bit more. So let's do the second slur in the second system of number 10. Okay, has a nice little octave jump at the very end. All right, we'll do this again 3 times in each position. Same tempo. Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. So let's just do the last one. And we'll just do this one twice. All right, same tempo. And just keep that air flowing. 1, 2, 3. Never take a big enough breath when I'm talking. I'm sorry. Ran out of air. Good. Okay. Now, a little sight reading. This is just putting the articulation, slide movement, all the stuff we've been sort of doing to a test. Obviously, the key of E flat, and we're just going to try this. We're going to slur almost the whole thing. Okay, so we'll just keep it. We'll go a little slower than that. But this is a nice one for just. I like doing something like this. I mean, you could pick something out of Arbenz, or you can make up something yourself. But it's just kind of a nice way to just get your articulation going a little more than we just were when we were doing it earlier with one note. So let's do this at we'll do it at 88. Oh, we'll even go slower. We'll go slower now. 72 is good. It's good to do them slow. I always do them slow and then fast. Do it twice, 2 different ways. And when you switch tempos, it's interesting to sort of notice if you're changing anything as you play, if you're changing articulation or where you're articulating when you go faster. It's nothing to be feel bad about it. It might just happen. It's good to know that you do that. Just to ask the question, do I need to do that? If you do it. If you don't, don't. Simple. All right, so let's play it slurred and kind of slow. 1, 2, 3. Good. All right. Feeling pretty good. We got it now. Let's go a little. Let's do it with a little shorter, a little more detached. I don't really want to say staccato. I'm sorry. It's more detached. If you think of a string instrument, we're still kind of on the string in a way. You know, bum 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 bum. We're maybe changing bow direction, but we're not bum bum bum. We're not taking a clean lick out of each of these. We're not coming off the bow too much. All right. 1, 2, ready. One other thing I wanted to add to this, and this is something in the Arbin's book that you can experiment with a lot. I intentionally wrote the fifth bar to have fewer 16th notes to help you work on breathing in time. Obviously, most people need to take another breath somewhere in there, and I was actually taking breaths in almost all the spots I could just to practice taking air in time. What I sometimes visualize is when I have 2/16 and an eighth, it's just like 4/16, right? But the third 16th, I'm breathing, and I actually practice that. It takes a little time to get the knack of this, but when you incorporate that feeling of rhythm when you play a rhythm like this, it helps. So rather than da 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 da, or just grab a breath, think of it as da 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 da. So in context, da 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 da. Or actually, it's actually after the eighth note. What am I saying? I'm not breathing in between the 16th and the eighth. It's after the eighth, so it's da 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 da. So it's the last 16th of the bar is where I'm taking my breath. So it's da 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 da. So that last 16th on that is where I'm breathing, as opposed to the eighth and 2/16. That's what I was thinking. Breathe after the eighth. Da 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 da. So that's all rhythmic. That's in time. So one of the things that we have trouble with as brass players, and especially as low brass players, is playing rhythms like that eighth and 2/16 and dragging on it. And a lot of times people think my tongue's not fast enough. My single tongue speed is terrible. It's actually sometimes it's not the case. It's actually your time is terrible. That's the bad news is your time's terrible. The good news is your articulation might not be that bad, but your time is not quite where it could be. So if you breathe with enough time, which is right in rhythm, you'll have plenty of time to pop out those 16ths right on that first 16th note on an eighth and 2/16 is on the and. People forget that. They'll go da 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 da. Very often they'll be behind on that. Da 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 da. So it's important to keep that in mind. And I think when you add the breath on that second 16th note, da 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 da. Let's try that together if you want to try that. 1, 2, ready, go. Da 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 da. Okay, I'm breathing kind of loudly to make my point. Obviously, you don't want to really breathe with that much volume. Let's try it on an F, and I'll do it slowly and see if you can get the hang of this. Da 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 da. I'll do it 2/16 and an eighth, and I'm breathing on the last 16th of each beat. Ready? 1, 2, ready. Let's try it together. We can all play if you want. 2, ready, go. Okay, don't hyperventilate because you're kicking in more air than you need. But let's try the other rhythm. So ba 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 ba, and. Okay, so that's a good little trick. It comes in handy too for dotted rhythms like dotted 8/16. Da 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 da. You can breathe sometimes on the end. da 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 da. So you breathe on the right on the end of the beat, keeps you in time. Your whole musical package includes rests. I tell students I wish they'd changed the word from rest. Rest implies, non-doing. Rest, even if you're counting 170 bars rest in Magic Flute, you gotta be in the music. You gotta know the piece. You have to think like a musician even when you're not playing. And I think when you're breathing, you really have to think like a musician. And I think part of being a musician and playing music is always feeling time. And I think if you feel the time with your breath like that, it's very helpful. I'm a little torn. I know some people have a hard time thinking really rhythmically when they first play a note. Like they feel like that makes them play kind of stiffly if they breathe in time before a big entrance. I've tried to work on it so that it's not tense, but still I feel the rhythm very strongly before I play. I always feel like I want to try and be in the rhythm way before I play anything, and I'm hearing it in my head, hopefully, and then that hopefully propels that. Okay. If you have any questions about this, shoot them up to Jason. I don't know if you have. Jason, are there any questions at this point? No, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Good, okay. Now, this next thing's just I think this is a kind of a upper range building thing. I've always felt that adding notes to your upper register is a certain act, and maybe lower register too, is a certain act, and that's developing your register. Then there's maintaining your upper register, and I think there's a slightly different mindset to both these things. You want to do both every day if you can, especially if you're still developing your playing to be able to have full, 3.5 or so octave range on your horn or more. I think it's good to think both ways. You're not always trying to play high notes alone. You're trying to make sure you play the next register and make it part of your middle register. You want to own the next overtone that you add to your list. And sometimes people surprise themselves that they can play, they have trouble maybe with a high D above the staff, but they can play a C in third position, no problem. The high C in third position. So what you try to work for is okay, I know how to do that. I have that partial. I own that partial there. How can I get that partial to ring in the closer position where it feels higher? So it's a good way to sort of thinking down and then working out from that. Thinking of the middle and working out from the middle. And I think this exercise kind of does that because you're in all these nasty alternate positions. And so you really are forced to play these upper partials with a great quality sound, even though you're playing you're playing them in a position you would never play them in real life. So really try to, even if you first start this exercise, when you do it at home, maybe play it once in the natural positions and then play it in the alternate positions and see if they kind of kept close. All right, let's start in 7th, and we'll do this, it's 60 again, our old tempo mark. Okay. And I like a nice light articulation on this, not real hard. And don't get harder with the articulation as you get higher either. 1, 2, 3. Take a second. We'll go out to the 7th and start on that series of overtones. There's your first note. If you're not used to playing G sharp in 7th. 1, 2, 3. next one. We're going up to some real upper register notes. You know, do what you can. If you're really struggling, you know, take a break. If it's feeling pretty good, just keep going and make a mark of where you stop and come back to that point and maybe go a little further in a few days. So here's B in seventh. Who would play a B in seventh? Okay, ready? 1, 2. Good. Okay, so that's just a good way of, again, if you're working too hard, if you're working much harder in these upper partials, just remember how you felt when you're playing the lower partials and see if you can play it on a regular basis, as relaxed as you can, even if the sound isn't great, even if the notes crack a little bit. Go for the sound in your head and the easiest way to get that accomplished. And if you have to push it a little bit more, if you have to apply a little bit more resistance, or I hate to use that word, but if you have to apply a little bit more readiness, I guess that's a better word, readiness to be able to play in that register, try it and then see if you can back off on it over time. This is not an exercise that you master every day. It's always one that you're going to come back to. It's one of those fateful realities of things like this. You're always going to practice these things if you want to keep improving and to maintain wherever level you're at. It's really important. Now this next thing is just a articulation thing I wrote it in a funny meter just to mess with you. I'm going to put it up to 120 and I'll play it once so you can hear it because it looks funny on the page. I almost apologize for that. Okay, it looks weird, right? So let's just try that. Let's start in seventh. And again, I didn't do a very good job of it, but see if you can get that same quality of sound that you get in that same partial in first. See if you can get it in seventh. Yeah, just try that a couple times. See if you can match that sound. Da, 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 da. Yeah. All right, so let's try it. I'll give you 6 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then the next part, there you go. That's weird, huh? And then, so what I usually like to do this next thing is, since I've been playing kind of in the upper register, you kind of build up a little bit of built-up air, maybe, and a little bit of tension. Take that beat, that bar rest, and just chill. Just let that full 3 counts, let all the air that you've been using that's been becoming toxic, let it out, and then big full breath right after. Okay, let's try it again. Start in seventh, and see if you can remember that next little 3 count thing, 6 count thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, up. Good. Okay. There's some high notes there. That's just a good way to kind of, I think it's important when you're building your upper register, obviously if you're in a building mode, a developing mode, keep going. And even if go one pass, if you can, go one past the one that's barely playable. Maybe just every day push yourself into that next level without going crazy about it and without doing it over and over and over. Every once in a while, it's a good idea to. I like Dick Nash has this phrase. He's famous for this one solo that he played when he first came to L.A. It was on this tune called Nirvana. If you haven't ever heard him, Dick Nash play the trombone on that piece, you got to hear it. He's like 20 years old, and he plays this thing, and he's got high G's in it, and it's great. And he said, "Yeah, it was written down the octave, but I was feeling frisky." And so, I encourage you to feel a little frisky and check those notes out. You got to visit that register once in a while, even if you don't have it mastered. I think it's really important to pay those notes a visit every once in a while, hat in hand probably, but I would recommend going up into that upper register and seeing how you do every day a little bit more. It's you have to get there. I found that there were certain notes that I was chipping away at for a long time, and it just wouldn't come, and I just kept chipping away, and then one day, I don't know what it was, that note suddenly, it was like riding a bike. Suddenly I had balance. And maybe that's a key idea is finding the balance of those notes. It's not brute strength. It's kind of what to do with your air. It's kind of what you do with your tongue. It's all those things are important, but it's really balancing all the elements of playing together that helps you develop I find the upper register, because it's such a weird little space that you have to find yourself when you're up in those super high, with all those partials so close together, and not always really very nice about letting you into their world. So it's good to just sort of knock at the door on a regular basis. Be persistent. All right, so this is just a little warm down thing after we played all those high notes. Let's just play this. Nice way to relax. I won't put a metronome on. So if you right now, if you want to do something else just to sort of blow out your chops, I like this one, but if you can do whatever you want here, we're all muted. I won't tell anybody if you won't. 2, ready. Go down a couple keys in the warm-up phases. This next exercise is, some people call this a spider. You're doing down and up a scale at the same time. Whoa! And so we're just doing the key of F, and I like to do this. This is an exercise that was given to me by Roy Main, my old teacher. He made us all do expanding scales in every key, and he used them for a lot of different things. Like once you memorize the pattern, he would make you do them slow, make you do them a little faster, make you do them with every kind of articulation. And the idea is to focus on that middle note, that F, the pivot note, the pedal note, and make sure that your sound matches all the way through the horn as best you can. Now, of course, when you get into certain registers and you're using alternate positions, it's kind of cool sometimes to have a different sound on those notes. I don't fault that, but it's really good to be able to have that control so that you can actually sort of make those outer position notes that you don't always go for a little more usable and as a substitute for the regular position note. It's good to have that as a little bit of an option rather than just as an alternative that sounds different. That's cool too. But this one really helps focus your timbre on the middle range of the instrument without going too crazy, going for the extreme octave by the time you get to the end. This is sort of similar to that scale exercise. I sort of think of building from the middle and thinking of the low notes when I'm playing the high notes, and thinking of the high notes when I'm playing the low notes. It sounds real kind of psychobabble, but I find that one useful. All right, so we'll do this at like 69. That's a good tempo for these. Let's go there. And I got solid front end of the sound here. Remember, the front end is really created with the air and the vibration of the lips, not just the tongue. The tongue kind of gives it a nice corner, but you can actually do these with breath attacks if you want. You can do these on breath attacks if you like. But I like a nice solid D tongue on these with a good solid airstream behind it. All right, too much talking. 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. So those are fun to work up to different tempos, and you can do different things with them. For instance, I might play them as in eighth notes or even a little faster. So that's a good way to do it, and then switch keys. You want to try that one with me? We'll do it slow. A flat. See if you can do it. 1, 2, 3. Good. It's kind of a mind blower a little bit. But they're really good to practice. And then sometimes I use them for articulation practice. Maybe repeat a note. I might substitute this exercise for that Mike Davis-y kind of one that we did earlier. So go. Etc. You know, you can do it any which way you want, and still get the same benefits, but just add a few variables to it to make it interesting. So you can create your own variations on these. I encourage it. Okay, so now this last thing is really kind of an ear trainer. So we're gonna. Whoa, come on. Let's be nice. Be nice. There we go. That's it. I know it's at the bottom of this page. Okay, and there it is. All right. So what I'm doing is, again, I'm going around the cycle of fourths, but I'm actually playing a little 4-note pattern, and I'm transposing this into every key around the cycle. So this is just the first 4 notes of the Clark study, and I love the Clark studies, and those are great to practice too. This is my sort of an outline of my first notes of the day. So when I do my second practice session, usually like this one takes 35 to 45 minutes. And then the next practice session might be an hour. That would consist of scales and arpeggios and patterns that I'm practicing either for improvisational purposes or just practice for articulation and focusing on. I sometimes use that as an opportunity to focus on some of the smaller details in this warm-up. So you might take a topic of this, like upper register articulation. I might I'll play through some scales, and then I'll play scales with that in mind. So it's just a way to kind of organize my practice in a kind of disorganized way. So this is just a 4-note pattern, and it's really good for your ears. I'm going to leave it there, so help you. It'll get you started, and hopefully you'll know the next key. Don't worry if you're slamming along and it's a little awkward at first. This exercise really helps you develop your ears to hear what you're going to play before you play it. So that's why I like this one. All right, so let's just go through this slowly. Again, we're going to go at about. We'll go nice and slow. We'll go at 6. Yeah, we'll go at 69. That's a good tempo. All right. So this is just 1, 2, 3, 1 of the scale going through the cycle of fourths. 1, 2, ready. Cycle. So let's try a little different one. Let's try instead of going back to the 1, let's try 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. All right, so go up to the 5th of each scale. That one's kind of nice. This is a familiar sound. You hear tenor sax players playing this lick all the time. All right, let's try this one. So we go 1, 2, 3 in the key of F. It'd be F, G, A, C, and then B flat, C, D, F. All right, 1, that same tempo. 1, 2, and good. So you can, and the sky's the limit with this kind of stuff. I mean, we can do 1 7 1 2, 1 2 4 5. You know, you can mix it up, and also do it in minor keys. Obviously, mix it up every day. So I like to take one little 4-note pattern and put it through the cycle. Maybe do 2 different patterns, and that's it. And then by then I've got my brain, my air, my chops kind of in a place where I feel pretty good every day. So I think I did too much talking. So this went on way too long. But you can usually crank through the. I wanted to teach this like my old Tai Chi teacher taught, which she didn't speak a word of English. She just got up there and everybody's going, what's she doing? What's she doing? And, okay, so you just follow. I had that in mind, but I talked too much. So anyway, give this a try. See, I'd love to hear what you guys think of this little routine. If you try it for a couple days or something, and see how if it transposes if it just completely transcends your playing to a level you've never thought possible. Well, you probably won't do that, but hopefully your chops will feel pretty good. And if you're like me, sitting at home, trying to practice, and you're sitting here by yourself, it's always good to have a few new things to try. And maybe I highly recommend recording these and maybe create little echoes back and forth of one of you playing it and then the other you live playing it. Use a drone, use a metronome, use a tuner, or don't. Whatever your preference. The idea here is to just get your body involved in the music making process right away. And remind yourself of what it's like to play, and then hopefully build on that and have a few things that build all the time that you're checking in with. So if there are any questions about this or anything else, I am more than available.
Actually, Alex, if you could just do us a favor and stop your screen share, that way we can all go back to seeing the whole grid. And then, yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in.
Okay.
I know we had some people that had to peel out various, things.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I had one kind of question observation, I guess, on the last exercise where you started changing the scale degrees and the leading tones. I found myself when I played 1 2 3 5, I then would have this debate in my head of, all right, am I going to resolve it down an octave or am I going to resolve it by step? And then I would try to do both and then just mess it up. And so like I really found that I kind of need to go through and just kind of exercise that aspect of voice leading muscle, so to speak.
Right, because it's not very well voice led actually. I mean, it goes against your if you're writing a line, you're going against the pattern in a way of good voice leading. It's better to it's barely just learning those 4 notes and just moving them around, which is really so that you can. The idea with improvising most of the time is be able to pick it out, just be able to pick it out and play it, whatever the key is. So this forces you to do that. You can do that with scales too. You can. If you go into the Phil Wilson's book and the viola saxophone book, they get into some really cool stuff with scale practice that's sort of similar to this. Either through cycles or they just go through. You can do it. You don't have to do the fourths. You can do thirds. You can do. You can go through the cycle of anything. It's kind of an all around little thing for getting your brain wrapped around playing stuff by ear. And between that and playing songs by ear, I think it's really really helpful. Dave Sporting has his hand up. Look at that. For an excellent student.
Hey Jason, that's a John Coltrane lick, and it basically isn't resolving. He would just run that on changes, whether they were moving down chromatically or around a circle or in whole steps or whatever. So it's like an ear training kinesthetic, that.
Yeah.
So it's a Coltrane
Exactly.
lick.
You can go nuts with that. The really interesting thing sax players, and great improvisers, mostly sax players are doing, and there are a few trombone players that are onto this, is they can take all different kind of alternative patterns over a set of chord changes that are wild. I mean, it's amazing. Things in fourths, things in parallel. It can get really complicated real fast, but somehow it's all a matter of getting back home. That's the whole thing with the cycle, is you're figuring out a way to get back to one. And sometimes playing licks in those different keys is an interesting melodic device to do that. But it's also just good for your ears. Jason and I talked a little bit about this. I like to employ what I consider an improviser's mindset. Even if you're not a jazz musician, I think it's really important to, I think improv, it's in one of the things on one of those handouts, but I think an improviser's mindset is really to do with creativity and being a complete musician, and not just relying on what you read and what you're told and what you think is the proper way to play the instrument. I think sometimes you have to kind of allow your imagination to maybe go against the status quo once in a while if you want to try it. It's hey, they say I shouldn't use alternate positions on this piece. Well, let me try them and just see what it sounds like. Yeah, it sounds bad. Okay, I won't do it. You find an answer sometimes, but it's always worth the question. You find stuff. That's how great players, to me, really find their own voice, is they take what's the good, status quo information and kind of build on it. They don't necessarily contradict it. Sometimes they do, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But it's good once in a while to push yourself, and sometimes you might discover something about your own playing that you didn't realize you had. So I think it's really important to be curious, and also it builds this flexibility in your musicianship. I think a lot of people, if they're used to playing things a certain way, maybe their teacher told them a certain way, and they don't open up to the idea that maybe there's other ways, and that they might not work for them, but it might work for other people. So when you teach, I'm sometimes giving students information and exercises that I really don't use myself, but I can sometimes see how that could be useful to someone who thinks that way. Some people are more analytical with the way they think about playing the trombone. Some people just go off their natural instincts, and so I try to encourage people to go outside that, whatever they're coming from. Once in a while it's good for a deep thinker. Once in a while, just to play this by ear, don't think about it. And then other people, it's like, hey, have you thought about what you're doing here? And they go, oh no, I hadn't thought of that. Well, maybe think about it a little bit, see if it helps. A lot of people get caught up in this idea, this nice meme of paralysis by analysis. I think it's paralysis by incorrect analysis or misled analysis. I think sometimes people get stuck in they get stuck in these sort of do loops of an echo chamber of things that they keep telling themselves has to be the way to do it. And that kind of thinking, to me, is negative. But if you're thinking about, what if I do this? Or, hey, I heard this guy do this. How does he do that? Or I heard this player do this or that. I think that's healthy. What if I did? I like the what if I do this? What if I tried this way? And you can come up with all kinds of crazy stuff. What if I play this Bordoni etude in a minor rather than the written? I'll flat all the thirds. What is it going to sound like? That sometimes sounds pretty funny, but that's okay. You figured out a good thing to play for your friends when you're in a rehearsal and right before you play your Rochut in a minor key and everybody gets a good laugh. Okay, that's not a big accomplishment, but if you're thinking that way constantly, things will stick sometimes that you didn't think were possible. Anyway, so any other questions about anything?
Well, I just had one question. I just have one question, but by all means, everyone else, feel free to raise your hand or jump in, because I definitely don't want to monopolize the time here. But Dave, this is a proxy question from Dave Rude, who had asked me to ask this of you so he can watch the video later to hear your answer. He was just really interested in how you started in the studio scene and how that all kind of, like, the genesis of that experience in your life. I don't know if you could just take maybe a couple minutes and just talk about that.
Sure. I grew up in Southern California, so when I was getting more interested in music, I was aware of these musicians that were doing this stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of people who don't live in an area like New York or LA or London, or where there's a lot of big concentration of players, they don't have a concept of what that kind of freelance life is. Freelance life to a lot of people is just filling in the orchestra, or maybe doing weddings and some other jobs, maybe a show that comes through, or playing acts. That goes on a lot in LA, and that's how we all have done that kind of work and continue to do that kind of work here. But I was at UCLA, and I was at a good school for being in the middle of the media world here. I saw a lot of great stuff at UCLA. Great bands played there, and lots of music. And I got backstage to meet with players. My college jazz band backed up Freddie Hubbard and stuff. And so he lived here. So there were all this great music in town that you could go hear on any given night. And a lot of the people playing in the clubs were studio musicians. After work would go play. They'd go play it out in town. So I heard a lot of great jazz musicians who were also studio musicians. And so I was around this culture a little bit. And also, we had great orchestras here in town. I'd go to hear the LA Philharmonic a lot when Zubin Mehta was conducting and Giulini was conducting, which was just phenomenal. Some of the best concerts I've ever heard during that time. It was really fantastic. And I ushered at the Hollywood Bowl actually for several seasons, and I was in the very, very back of the place, which is a tenth of a mile from the stage. That's where I ushered, in the fifth promenade, way in the back. So the Star Spangled Banner was da 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 da. It was hilarious to watch the conductor, and oh my god. And anyway, so I was around these wonderful musicians that were sort of on a pinnacle to me, or a podium or platform. And when I got to UCLA, I was not a music major. I was actually an economics major, because there were too many required courses for the music major. I didn't want to do. I wanted to get out of school in 4 years if I could, and I knew a little bit about economics, and it tapped into a lot of my interests, like math and writing and reading about history and all that. And so that's a good major, and it had the lowest number of upper division courses, so that was a good one for me. That meant I could play all I wanted, really. I was playing in all the school groups. They stopped letting me take school music groups for credit by my sophomore year as a non-major, so I was just a tag along in all those groups I played in. And there were not many trombone players at UCLA then. Now the program's fantastic, but back then there was only one trombone major at the whole school, and he was like a musicology major, really. And so they were always short of players for the ensembles. So I played both jazz bands, both wind ensembles, the orchestra. I played all the shows whenever they did a theater show in our amazing theater department, which produced lots of big stars. So I was around this thing, and my teacher and my jazz band director was a very busy studio clarinetist named Gary Gray. He's a fantastic clarinet player, and he used to bring us to sessions at Warner Brothers and Fox and just let us watch. We'd get a guest pass, and we'd just sit there and watch them record this music with a little TV orchestra. So it was like 25, 30-piece orchestra. And then one time I went to see a big session with about an 80-piece orchestra, and it blew me away. It was like, I never thought of myself doing that. I just wanted to play, and I loved all these musicians, and I just wanted to play as well as that. I didn't think too much about it as a career at all. I never set my sights on it. I never said I'm going to be a studio musician. It was always like, I want to play better. That was always my focus, and what I tried to get from the players that I'd encounter. I took lessons with several of those players, including Bill Booth, and I took lessons with Ralph Sauer for a while. But it was really the lessons I got the most from, as far as both the freelance world and basic fundamentals of the trombone. It was after I graduated from college. I studied with Roy Main. And Roy was a fantastic teacher at fundamentals, and he was also a very busy freelance player in town. He played Broadway shows in town. He was the sort of the first call Broadway show guy, and then he also did a lot of studio work. He played on The Godfather, and he played on some great movies. And he knew all the players that were doing that work, and he would talk about them, and say what great people they were, and what gentlemen they were, or what great people they were to work with. It was almost all men back then, obviously. So it was like that was sort of the focus of his teaching, was trying to figure out a way to fit into that world. And so as time went on, I started getting little opportunities, little things came up, and Roy might throw me a job here or there. And he had a core of students that ended up being most of the studio players in LA now. Almost everybody: Andy Martin, Bob McChesney, Alan Kaplan, Bob Sanders, the bass trombone player. I mean, everybody studied with Roy at some time, so he gave a very good, broad picture of the scene out here. So then, after that, I found out from an old friend of mine, Dan Levine, who lives in New York now. He's a great trombone player. We played in the Disney All-American College Band in 1980, and we played together. He was from Colorado, I was from California. We played together in this band for the summer. And he got a call to go out with Maynard Ferguson, but he was unable to do it. So he said, "Hey, Alex, they're having openings. Steve Weiss, who'd been the trombone player, is looking for a replacement. And would you be up for doing it?" And I said, "I'll send a tape." So I made a little demo tape and I sent it to him and I got the gig. So I went out with Maynard for about 2 years, which was incredible. Great experience, playing my horn every night. And having to play at a high level and getting to solo and doing all that stuff. It was really good for me. I would not have called myself really solely a jazz trombone player before that, but that cemented it in, and I was around these incredible jazz musicians like Rick Margitza, an incredible sax player, Tim Reese, who's a wonderful sax player, lives in New York, he's played in Maria Schneider's band, and so did Rick. And then there was just all inspiring musicians. So I learned a lot out there. I really started getting more interested in improvisation and picking people's brains. And then I went out with Woody Herman's band after that. John Fedchuk and Paul McKee left, so I got called to play in that band and I did that band for about a year. And then when I got back to LA, I kind of had some credits. Now I played with Maynard, and I was getting called once in a while. Some of the studio players we were meeting in rehearsal bands and other rehearsals and stuff, orchestras, and so my name was sort of coming up among those players as a sub. So I was doing a lot of sub work. I subbed a lot for Andy Martin. I was like his shadow for I still am on a lot of stuff. There were about 4 or 5 gigs that he had a regular gig, and he would get a better gig, so I'd go sub for him. And I would say I was making a pretty decent living, able to survive in LA on just doing sub work and doing a little teaching. It was pretty good. I was pretty happy. I was having a good time. I'd sub at Disneyland in one of the many bands that they had down there. I'd play Latin gigs around town with salsa bands. It's just whatever came up, I was doing it. And a few sessions here and there, mostly kind of undercover kind of stuff. This composer had a demo, maybe somebody I knew in college. Yeah, you can come play some trombone for me. Yeah, sure. So it was very low key. A lot of composer classes at a couple of schools out here would hire a little orchestra, and I played on those. And then sometimes they'd remember you when they got a job. So I was starting to get a little studio work here and there, but I finally, in '89, I was working at Disneyland doing a show, and I started practicing excerpts really hard because there was an audition for second trombone with the Pacific Symphony, which is a really very good orchestra out here, close to full time, not quite full time, but it's a really nice orchestra, and it consisted of a lot of studio players that were going down to Orange County, down south about 70 miles to go play in this fun orchestra. So I auditioned, I prepared, I hadn't touched an excerpt in about 10 years, and so I auditioned for this orchestra, and I didn't win, but I made the finals. And on the committee for the audition were all the brass players from the orchestra, and they're all studio players. So when I got to the finals, they said, "Hey, you sound good, but we didn't know you did this kind of music too." And I said, "Well, I just started getting back into it." And so that's when I started getting studio work. Is really that moment, because I had sort of proven myself to be able to play. I was on the road with Maynard, and I was doing big bands in town like Tom Kubas and Bob Florence's band, and then when I started started doing a little bit of orchestra stuff, I started subbing in the Pacific Symphony. So I had this sort of dual nature career going, and again, I was just doing it because it was fun. I had no real aspirations to push my career. I just wanted to learn about how to play better, and that's when a couple contractors in town started getting my name, and I started working a little bit. Some other players were very gracious and helpful to me at a couple times when either they needed subs or they needed a second player for their section. And a couple people kind of retired, which really helped me. And then starting about when I met Joe, actually, when we went together, Joe Rabita down there, I see you, and we were at the Joe Alessi seminar in 2001. That really changed me because I really had a nice 10-day focus on orchestral playing, and it really helped me. And I had an audition right after that for the Long Beach Symphony, and I ended up winning that position, and I've been principal with them since 2002. So I have an orchestra playing, which is so fun. I really love it. And that also helped too. There was another contractor that heard that I'd gotten into that. So really, there's no way to set out on a path to become that kind of player. I couldn't give you, and whatever that is now is different than when I did it, and it was different than when players before me did it. It was a very different process, but that's kind of how it worked. It was over, I would say, at least it was a simmering and percolating for 10 or 15 years. You can't just move to a town like London or here or New York or Atlanta or any of the great cities with great music and just expect to come in and start working. And I grew up here. I mean, you might even say it took 30 years to really do it, and 30 years with no real aspiration. I mean, it was, but I was developing the skill sets. I think I focused on that, and that was what was helpful for me to sort of break through some of those barriers, which I didn't see as barriers. Maybe that was it. I wasn't like trying to break in. It was like, let's see. But I'm doing okay. I got a couple things on my book, and January is bad, but that's okay. Everybody's slow in January. That's when we get together and play. That's when I practice. People sometimes they won't practice because they don't have a gig coming up, and I tend to be with a bunch of my colleagues. We all think this way. Hey, it's slow. Time to practice. It's like that's the time you sharpen the sword, is when you're not working. Because when you're working, sometimes it's impossible to keep the practice going when you have either something really difficult to play that you want to save yourself for, or you're working. A 6-hour double session on a movie can be really brutal, mentally and physically on your horn if it's kind of music that we sometimes have to play, and sometimes some of the movie work, especially, all the tenor trombone players very often have to play bass trombone, and we're sitting there cranking out 5 or 6 of us playing low C's as loud as we can sometimes, and it's crazy. It's that can be kind of a I have to go home and practice soft long tones on my tenor after a day like that sometimes. So it's like you have to remember what it's like to be just normal. And so anyway, that's kind of my story. There are so many people, and I was so lucky in so many instances. If you ever read, I don't know which Malcolm Gladwell book it is, but it's the one where he talks about how Stephen Jobs came to prominence, and how the timing of his interest and his kind of intellect was the exact moment that it needed to be in order to revolutionize home computing.
Yeah, I think that was Outliers.
Outliers, yeah. I always get Link and Outliers. I get all those mixed up.
Right.
And so I really think that in my case, I was very lucky to be maybe near the end of the baby boom and be able to come in when some other people were kind of retiring or going into other businesses. And also our business shrank. It continues to shrink, obviously, right now. I really got in a very good time. I was very, very fortunate, and I had some real helpful people along the way. The thing I'm excited about now is that I'm seeing more people from different backgrounds coming to LA to play music. We're starting to see more. The studios have much more women. We're starting to get much more representation overall. It's not where it should be, but it's starting to happen, and I'm really excited about that. I credit a lot of it to people sticking in school and getting through their programs and really studying hard and learning the basics and getting their chops up to a level that's spectacular right now. I mean, I think we're in a kind of a renaissance period for brass playing, and I think the more people with different backgrounds take part in it, it's just better for all of us. And that's the thing I'm excited about seeing as I sort of work my way into other things, because you have a half-life as a studio musician. And so that you kind of always have to think of the next thing. And I'd love to see people coming up. I just hope there's a good amount of work for people coming up that's still here. But I've had students that are pretty resilient and pretty accepting of the different kinds of things that they have. They have to create a lot of their own opportunities now that I didn't have to do. I was lucky. I could go down to the union and have my horn, and it was very common for people to say, "Hey, we need a trombone player in room 7." Great, you just go and play. You're sitting in a band with some great players. You have their records, or they're on records that you've played. And that was a magical time in the late '70s through I would say the early '90s. It was really an amazing time. Anyway, is there any other questions or anything?
How are you, Alex?
Oh, good, Joe. How are you?
I'm good.
I keep reading about you.
In that vein, in that 6-hour session vein, is the market pre-COVID, not talking about COVID, saturated? Is it welcoming to a young new player who moves out to LA? How does that work?
It's pretty complicated. I mean, we've seen a few players come here and stick with it and do really well. There's a great first trumpet player and section player named Rob Shear. He's a fantastic trumpet player. I don't know if you know him. He subs with the Philharmonic. He plays lead in John DeVerse's big band. He can improvise. He's a great arranger. We did something for Disney the other night. A Disney short. He did all the arrangements for this piece. That was great. He's wicked with Pro Tools. He's wicked with all the music software. He's to me the representative of the cutting edge player of who's working in. He's in the scene now, but he's the one that the players in their 20s and 30s need to be looking at. What is he doing? And that's more like what they're going to be doing. I mean, I was lucky. I basically just had to learn. I always loved playing different kinds of music, which was helpful for me, and I started adding other instruments, which was helpful, especially the bass trombone. I don't think I'd have a career if I hadn't started playing the bass trombone at some point. So those sorts of things, and also my small tenor and my big tenor has always been part of my life. Going back to junior high, I always had a marching horn and a concert horn, and so when I started doing, and then when I got a better quality small bore tenor, and started playing more of that kind of music, commercial music and jazz and all that kind of stuff, it was really helpful for me. And that was, I didn't think of it this way, but that was ended up being a very helpful asset to moving on. Anyway, yeah, but it's tough. I won't kid. Where it used to be, the older players told the younger players, even before I started, they'd say, give it 6 months, see what it's like. Huh. I know people that move after 2.5, 3 years here, maybe 5 years, and they're actually, their name is coming up. I hear it, among other players. I've heard this person play, she's great, he's great. It's like you hear the buzz is happening, but they're not seeing it in results. They're not seeing any dates going into their book, so they go, I guess I'm not going to make it here. And I find out they moved, and I go, oh my God, you were like, that window that you reached, very few people reach that point, and you I understand, it's frustrating. And very often, like with studio work, you'll do one gig and you'll think, great, I got to do a studio gig. I'm waiting for the next one. And it might be a year before you get another studio call. So for brass players especially, it's really important to keep involved in a lot of different kinds of music. I've done everything. I played Chinese funerals. I've played horrible wedding band kind of jobs. I played park concerts with horrible amateur bands. You do everything. You take every kind of situation because it's just an opportunity for you to be heard and for you to play, make some music with some people. Some of my most fun, treasured memories are with some amateur groups, actually, but that's another story. But it's being a freelance musician on a professional level. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of tolerance of things that you would not put up with when, say, you're in college. If somebody's not making their parts, sometimes the band director might say, you go to third clarinet. They can't do that here. People have tenure sometimes in their jobs, or they're just really good friends with the people that hire them. They're great people. Maybe they do some arranging. Maybe they do something else besides play. And so everybody comes to the table with different skill sets, and very often it's hard for people to break in because they have to fill in, not for that person necessarily. That person, when they start working, they might not just play clarinet. They might do some other stuff, and so they're kind of looking for a person that does those other things. There's one guy in town here named Ralph Williams, nobody really knows him. He's a phenomenal clarinet player, and every clarinet section wants him in there because he is by far the best bass clarinet player, contrabass clarinet player in town. He has those doubles so down. He's a real specialist in it. And he's also a great clarinet player too. He plays first clarinet sometimes, subbing down in the orchestra I play in, and it's great to have Ralph play. It's fun to hear him play regular clarinet. He's always playing the bottom parts, and we're always playing with him. We always have parts with him, and so he's just dead on. He's such a great. And when he's not there, we all feel it. It's like it's just his presence and his pitch and his sound and everything, his time. It's just so good, and so there's lots of room for certain specialties. That's kind of the thing out here too, that versatility is important, but once in a while people get in based on a specialty, but you just got to have the other goods to back it up. The example for that kind of idea to me is Bill Reichenbach. He is incredibly versatile, and everybody kind of knows that about him. He's a great improviser. He's a writer. He composes. He arranges beautiful stuff for trombone, and he has got all this musicianship. And he also plays great tuba, plays E flat tuba, and he's my second favorite tuba player to work with in town. And he's a great bass trombone player. He plays the contrabass trombone. Everybody kind of knows all these things about him, but he's also a great recorder player. He also knows tons of stuff about U.S. history. He knows film history, like expert level. He's like a real sage person out here, and one of those real rare kind of. He doesn't like the word, but I'll use it for him. Is kind of a genius level of talent and ability, and and also harness talent. He's worked hard to do what he does. He also plays great trumpet. I mean, he recorded an entire brass quintet about 30 years ago. He played all the parts, and he played the horn parts on an E flat flugelhorn that he has. And he's, you can pick up any instrument in any key and kind of. He plays jazz on the alpha clyde. This guy's nuts. I mean, he's just got this. He's got skills, just natural abilities that are kind of, harnessed abilities that are just kind of mind blowing. So those are the kind of people that really inspire me. It's like you don't even get to, it's like when you hear a great soloist sit down and play, you don't really even get to hear what they're capable of, even when they're playing something pretty like a recital or something. There's things that person can do probably. They never let on. They have all kinds of freaky side skills or secondary skills that are well developed. If you want to get a good taste of that, those two violin guys, the Asian guys that do the funny videos, look them up. Two violins. They do all kinds of spoofy videos, but they have this one series of videos where they actually also give really great instruction in string playing. And they have Hilary Hahn, the great violinist. She's been on that show like 3 or 4 times, and they goof with her. And there was this one episode where she had to play with her one string tuned down a half step, and she had to play some Paganini Caprice with one string or something tuned down a half step, and she played it. It's like, where do you learn how to do that? And then then they made her play a Bach partita with a hula hoop, and she's doing the hula hoop and it sounds great. And it's just little things like that. It's like, that to me is it's useless talent. That 2-set violin, that's it. And but it's just so fun to see someone sort of stepping out of what we think of them and showing some other skills. That's that creative thinking that I try to harness and try to encourage people to harness in their practice. And not to say that Hilary Hahn does that herself on a regular basis, but she's got the chops to be able to, I would imagine if she broke a string in a solo recital, she would be the one that would get through it pretty well without even having to pick up the concertmaster's violin. That she just struck me as this real kind of fun, has a real fun outlook on music, and I always love to see that. Anyway.
I would imagine that for like a young player who's trying to, I don't want to say break in, but go and establish some roots and get some opportunities, I can imagine it can be off-putting if somebody is almost too eager and too aggressive to try to kind of shove themselves into the scene. And so there's a bit of I think you mentioned more of an organic existence and a more organic approach that you experienced. And I feel like that's something that needs to happen, and that's kind of antithetical to this world of internet noise that everyone's kind of battle with.
Absolutely, and it's this idea that it's also sort of this image people have of American Idol and all those kinds of TV shows that award standout talent and push people to win things. And there with freelance playing in general, there's no real ultimate victory. There's not a particular thing that anyone really goes for. They just want to work, and they want to be able to survive. And a lot of that is understanding the collegial nature of work and being able to be a supporter, want to make the whole thing sound good. Like on a session, we're under a clock that is beyond us. They're working to get a certain amount of music done in 3 hours or so, and they want it to sound really good. And you want it to sound good. My goal is if they solo my track, it sounds good. I don't want to have something that's second rate. But with that in mind, you kind of have to eat it once in a while. If you make a little mistake on something, there's a real tendency to want to do something again and raise your hand and make it, I messed up bar 30. Well, you got to think, okay, the horn players were over there cranking it out above the staff for like 10 bars, and they're ready to kill anybody who wants to try and do it again. So you kind of have to think that way. They've been putting themselves on the line for 5 takes in a row, and you have one little mistake on one take. You just got to eat it. That's your ego has to take second to the job at hand. We're going to be here for another 10 minutes maybe till you and they get together. So it's important to kind of have a perspective on the big picture of what you're trying to do when you're in any job. And I found that some people are so trying to prove themselves sometimes to break in, and it's obviously that's part of the requirement. But more than proving yourself, it's to have something to say, to communicate, so that you really share yourself, so that you share something that's Dan Higgins is a great woodwind player in town, a number one call saxophone player and woodwind doubler in town here. He's played with John Williams, everybody. He says it's like a party, and you've been invited. What's the first question you ask when you're invited to a party? What do I bring? You don't ask who's going to be there. Where do you want me to sit? It's what do I need to bring? What do I need to bring to the party? And that's the question I think a lot of people forget when they go in any kind of professional situation. Even after they've had accolades and maybe won a job and they're on the job, they're constantly trying to prove their greatness rather than sharing their greatness to make everybody else and the music sound great. And there's a difference. That's a kind of a paradigm shift mentally for a lot of people. And I was lucky in a way that I didn't have that kind of virtuosic beginning of my life. I mean, it took me till I started when I was 9, but I really didn't get into it till I was about 13 or 14. That's when I started listening more to records and the radio and listening for trombone in situations. I'd watch the Lawrence Welk show to watch Bob Havens play those solos. I'd watch the Tonight Show to see if the band got a feature that night. That was we didn't have the internet. It wasn't all right there at our fingertips. We had to search it out. I'd go to the record stores every weekend for a couple hours every day, just going through the cutout bins trying to find $2 records with some trombone player I might have heard of. And it was a lot of work. And I read books about the history of jazz in particular, and then later on I read more about the history of Western music, and that became a sort of an obsession of mine to just learn about the history of certain kinds of music. And I always tried to figure out what whatever music I was playing was about, so I could figure out how to fit into it. I went into situations like my first New Orleans trad kind of situations where I was completely a fish out of water, even though I kind of had some experience improvising. I could play a chorus of Take the A Train or the Blues, but being able to play, I mean, it was so amazing the first couple times I did those jobs when they were calling tunes I didn't know and I had to hang on for dear life. That was ear training, that's what it was about. And the people that were having me come play were so cool about letting me suffer and learn on the job. I mean, it was really great. And they give me a little, hey, on the bridge it goes to A there. It's kind of a weird chord. Oh, okay, thanks. So it was always helpful to have a little bit of help. And but it's still, I mean, I still get in situations where I have to kind of rely on those instincts, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I have to kind of base it on that. And that's something I mentioned in one of my handouts, is this idea of versatility versus adaptability. It's an important idea. I think whatever you have on that day, you can't suddenly become more versatile that day. You have to adapt. Whatever you're doing that day, you have to be open to adapt to the situation. And I've seen really specializing, like orchestral players, do a pretty good job of adapting to something that's not in their regular repertoire. I've seen it happen. I've seen them also have real trouble or get frustrated too. I've seen that as well. And I've seen great, really great, I always think of sax players who can play great. They can play Coltrane in any, they can play Giant Steps in any key. They can play Cherokee in any key. At any tempo they can burn. They'll play all the transcribed solos they've learned. They're incredible musicians. They're great at that. And then they have to come in and play on a movie date for somebody like Randy Newman, who always has saxophones on his orchestra sessions. And sometimes it's jazzy, but sometimes it's just going poo on a low B flat on the tenor, and it's got to be right, and they're not ready for it, and they don't practice. They don't have the right read for it. They don't quite understand that concept. So but then there's other ones that are like I see some of the real hardcore jazz players come into that situation. They go, no problem, boom, and they've got it. They adjust and make it work. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as a musician. For me personally, just my own way of thinking about music is to try to adapt to the situations I'm in and try to push myself out of the ruts that I get in. For that. Nicholas Payton had a great line. He said when he was on the road with a quartet, just him and a quartet and a trio. Amazing. There'd be a solo trumpet with that and play that on a tour for 5-6 nights a week for a month. That is brutal on your chops. I mean, I do one night at a club fronting a rhythm section, and I'm wasted. It's a different kind of endurance, so you can't even describe it. to someone who hasn't tried to do that. It's a lot, and it's a lot of pressure because it's just you, and it's like a recital, but you're not sure what's going to happen at all. You have no plan. And so Nicholas said, like when you're on the road, do you practice? What do you do? He's all, when I wake up in the morning in the hotel, I put in a Harmon mute, and I turn on the TV, and I do everything I don't do in the gig. I thought that was a great line. That's a good little Reader's Digest version of how to, if you have a show or a concert series that you're doing, you're doing a lot of, really tough ball busting kind of pieces. If you go for practicing all the other stuff at home, that you're actually getting a nice balance in your week. It'll go from a tough week playing all this, you're doing, Heldenleben and all that kind of stuff in your orchestra gig, but then you come home and you can just kind of chill with some Rochut down the octave at half the dynamic or whatever, half the tempo. You can just figure out a way to do the opposite of what you're doing at work. And I find that when I do that, I can actually find a nice balance in my playing at the end of that week that I would have just been burnt otherwise. And actually playing a little bit more, but playing smart, you can actually counteract some of the effects of the hard. And then the opposite, if you're doing magic flute and you're playing alto and you got three, those wonderful 8 bars to play, you got that. That's important. That's a good thing. But then when you're home, maybe crank it up a little bit and practice some, run. That'd be a good time to work on your louder excerpts and stuff. So it's just common sense, really. But I think when he said that, everything I do at home, everything I do in the gig, I do the opposite at home. I thought that was a good little rule of thumb to follow.
Well, I think it's been about a couple hours. It's been amazing the insight that you've been able to share with us, and I greatly appreciate the time that you were willing to kind of give to the group. But you've definitely given us a lot to chew on, not only here but also the Dropbox link, which has a lot of other handouts that you tend to go through. And so it's just wonderful that you're leaving us with a lot to chew on in the future as well. So thank you for that.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Jason. I love this program. This is wonderful, and I get to meet some new people and see some familiar faces as well. And
it's not quite the same as in person, but I think it takes the edge off a little bit, as they say.
It does. It makes me feel good to see people and be able to have a little conversation. And I encourage anybody who has any more questions, if you think of anything else or you want to ask more questions about LA, if you're ever considering trying to move somewhere, that can. If you think about what you might want to do after school or something, you can look me up and drop me a line, and I can give a little more details on certain things. But anyway, it's really a pleasure, Jason, and you guys are doing a great job of this thing. Hopefully, you'll be able to keep it going a bit once we're all back hanging out. I know it's a lot of work to put these together, so.
I think there's still a place for it, so we're gonna try. We'll get creative and see what we can do. But it's been fun. So.
Great.
And for those of you that got the info, Alex Iles' website is on that the flyer that I send out. But what we tend to do is when we put this this video together, we'll post that on the International Trombone Hang website. There'll be a spot to show Alex Iles' masterclass date or whatnot, and you can check it out there. And I encourage you to check out his website, obviously. And let's all just keep doing our thing. So.
Yeah. Good, you guys. Have a great weekend. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Catch up with you soon, I hope in person.
Good to see y'all.
All right. Take care. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you, Alex. Really wonderful. Really appreciate the time.
Bye-bye. See you, Joe.
See you later, Alex.
Buffalo Joe.
That's right. See you, Jason.
We'll see you, Joe. Good seeing you.
You too.